ये क्या हुआ? अब क्या करना है हमने? मैं करूं? आवाज नहीं आ रही।
Can you hear me, sir?
Now I can, yes.
Okay, perfect. So let's just start.
Yes, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to latest session of Ideas Conclave. Today we have with us Pakistan's foremost travel writer, a fellow of the Royal Geographical Society, Mr. Salman Rashid, and he will be taking us through his journey of Pakistan in a series of pictures that he himself has titled Unseen Pakistan. Sir, over to you. Thank you so much for taking out the time and agreeing to talk to our students at the University of Central Punjab. And we look forward to your session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I call this Unseen Pakistan because these are places that not even the most well-traveled Pakistani would know of. Balochistan being my favorite place in the entire country, I begin with Balochistan. Now, if you visualize the map of Balochistan, it makes the extreme northwest corner of Balochistan makes a tri-point, a very sharp tri-point with Iran on one side and Afghanistan on the other side. In that apex of that tri-point, there is a place marked Rabat on the maps. Now, Rabat is an Arabic word which means Karwansarai. And ever since I saw this name on the map, I was always intrigued by the fact that there could possibly be or could have been a Karwansarai there at one time in the past. So I went there in 2007, and what do we have? We have these fabulous ruins of a Karwansarai, and it was a lovely day. It had been raining the day before, and we had clouds in the sky. The little thing that you see on the right margin of the picture is the fortress of the militia. But the Karwansarai is in the middle. There were rooms all around the. I've disappeared from the picture. Okay. There are rooms all around the walls, and in the center is this little house that you see on the left, which was the headquarters of the innkeeper. And in the Middle Ages, innkeepers were always women. This is very strange, but this is how it was. And Rabat is a very unique location because it was smack on the high road from the Gulf to Kandahar, which was at one time a great market and a great city and a rich and great city. So this was on the trade route. And interestingly, about 16 or 17 kilometers northwest of Rabat, Rabat being right on the Afghan frontier. about 15 or about 16 or 17 kilometers northeast of Rabat, there is another place in Afghanistan called Jali Rabat, the false Rabat. The story that I imagine is that um, this Rabat was doing great business. So someone a few miles away thought they could also do great business, and they opened another caravanserai there, but that failed. And forever after, it was known as Jali Rabat. I have not been to that Jali Rabat, but the story intrigues me, and who knows, one day I might end up there. Near our Rabat, there is this ruin of a church. Now, in when the Great War began in 1914, the British Raj in India was very paranoid about the Germans teaming up with the Turks and the Persians and sneaking into India from this back door of the subcontinent. So they posted a force in Sandak, which is now famous for the copper and gold mines. And there was a brigade, strength of soldiers, infantry, and engineers. And to service their spiritual needs, they built this church, which eventually fell out of use because the force didn't stay there very long until after the First World War. The white building that you see in the background is an Iranian military border post. And there is this lovely looking, it's the remains of a bungalow, which must have looked lovely at one time. It has this veranda with arches. And you know who this was built for? It was built for a man called then Lieutenant Colonel Reginald Dyer. 5 years later, after he was posted here in 1914, 5 years after that, in 1919, this man became the butcher of Amritsar when he killed 1,300 people in the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. Now, here's a bit of history, and this is very interesting. It says 106, 15, 4, 15. 106 is an engineers battalion, 106 sappers of the 2nd Quetta Brigade. This history you can dig out from army archives. And 15th April 1915 was the day a soldier who had very little to do was patrolling around this area, and he did this little bit of work. He didn't leave his name behind, but later on, there are some other names, Muhammad Rahim or something, and these chaps have added their own history to it. The hills on the skyline in the background are Pakistan's border with Iran. Okay, still Balochistan, and we are now traveling backward to Quetta. If you look at the map, you'll see a place called Nok Kundi. I don't know what Kundi means. Nok is new in Balochi. Kundi would be something else. This white peak on the skyline is known as, I'm growing old, I've forgotten the name. Anyway, it'll come back to me in a while. And this has an very interesting story. When you set out from Nokkandi, there is no road. You go through a desert, and then you enter a narrow river valley, which is a dry river, and you find these incredible natural sculptures created by wind and water erosion. I call this man the king of the valley. He looks like a crowned king. And here's a family group of people, all natural. The ogre of the valley. The face on the skyline is incredible. The peak of this hill is a is a dormant volcanic crater. This is the only volcanic crater in Pakistan, a real volcanic crater that used to erupt in some very long ago time. And you can see that the two eruptions, the last two eruptions, have left their cones in the middle. And now it hasn't, in living memory, there is no record of an eruption. No one knows of it, but you can clearly see that it is a volcanic cone. Those sand dunes in the background and that little dark hill, they are in Afghanistan. All the way coming back to Chaghi, which became famous in May 1998 for the atomic bomb, we are some miles north of the place where they blew up the mountain known as Rasko, known to these Urdu ke Sahafis as Chaghi ke Pahad. उसका नाम असल में है रास्को, केप माउंटेन्स। तो यहाँ पे एक ये मज़ार है जिसकी कहानी एक टेट नाम का आदमी था, जीपी टेट, जो कि 1898 की जो बाउंड्री कमीशन थी मैकमोहन की, उसके अंदर वो सर्वेयर था। उसने एक बड़ी दिलचस्प कहानी लिखी है, इसको कहते हैं बलानोश, इस पीर को कहते हैं। And the story that Tate tells us is very similar to St. George in England, that there was, in this village, there was a dragon which अजदहा एक होता था। वो रोजाना आके ना एक बंदे को खाता था और नाम निकाला जाया करता था कि आज किसको खाया जाएगा। तो एक दिन एक बंदा या बंदी थी जिसको, लड़की बेचारी जिसको खाया जाना था ड्रैगन ने, तो वहाँ उसको, वो बैठी रो रही थी कि अब मेरा वक्त करीब आ गया। तो पीर बलानोश वहाँ से कहीं गुजरे, उन्होंने देखा कि बच्ची रो रही, उससे पूछा क्या बात है। उसने कहा जी आज अजदहा का पेट भरने की मेरी बारी है। तो पीर ने कहा कि तो चलो तुम अपने घर जाओ और मैं इसको अजदहा को देखता हूँ। And then the pir proceeded to kill that dragon. When he died, he was buried here. Now that's the story that was current in the 1890s and in the early part of this century. But here is a very, very interesting social anthropological study. I went there in 2007 hoping to hear the same story, but the story had completely altered. What I was told was that Pir Balanosh, they admitted that Balanosh means Bala khane wala. The man who was looking after this tomb did indeed admit that Balanosh is Balaएं khane wala. But the story was that, and pay attention to the words. He said कि सजादीन जो कि रूसी सदर था, वो अपनी फौज लेके, रूसी सदर, वो अपनी फौज लेके यहाँ आया और उसने यहाँ के मुसलमानों को मारना शुरू कर दिया। तो पीर बलानोश जो कि गवादर के करीब कहीं रहते थे, उनको हमने चिट्ठी लिख के बुलाया। तो उन्होंने आके अपनी तलिस्माती कुव्वत से पीर बलानोश की पूरी अपने रूसी सदर सजादीन की पूरी जो फौज थी उसको मफलूज कर दिया और उन्हें सबको मार दिया। और जब ये, मैंने कहा ये कब हुआ? कहने लगे ये बहुत साल पहले हुआ, क्योंकि ये जो पीर बलानोश थे ये पोते थे हजरत अब्दुल कादिर जिलानी के, यानी कि ये आज से 800-900 साल पुरानी बात है और रूसी सदर की बात हो रही है। हुआ पता क्या था कि जब 1979 के अंदर रूस ने कब्जा कर लिया अफगानिस्तान के ऊपर, तो बहुत सारे महाजरीन बलूचिस्तान के इस इलाके में भी आए और वो रूसी सदर, और ये सदर वाला जो टर्म है ये तो मॉडर्न है। पुराने जमाने के पीरों के जमाने में कौन से सदर हुआ करते थे, बादशाह होते थे। लेकिन रूसी सदर, और सजादीन का नाम कैसे उन्होंने इजाद किया तो ये भी किसी को कुछ नहीं पता। लेकिन वो ये कि जी वो रूसी सदर जो था, वो उन्होंने आके अफगान महाजरीन ने दास्तानें सुनाई होंगी कि रूस वाले जुल्म कर रहे हैं, रूसी सदर है। तो वो जो अजदहा और वो सारा कुछ था, वो कुछ साल के अंदर अंदर ट्रांसफॉर्म हो गया, वो रूसी सदर बन गया। तो ये एक दिलचस्प एंथ्रोपोलॉजिकल स्टडी बनती है कि हमारे यहाँ कहानियां कैसे बदलती हैं। और ये एक वाहिद कहानी नहीं है जिसको मैंने बदलते हुए देखा है। ये तो टेट ने हमें 1902 में उसने अपनी किताब लिखी तो हम तक कहानी पहुंची, लेकिन बहुत सारी कहानियां मेरे अपने पिछले 40 साल में मैंने बदलते हुए देखी। अच्छा, एक बलूचिस्तान में एक बहुत ही दिलचस्प इलाका है जिसे मूला कहते हैं, मूला, वादी मूला। मूला दरअसल में एक बहुत तवील किस्म की पास है, दर्रा है, जो कि सिंध में, बल्कि सिंध के हाईलैंड्स में लाड़काना से थोड़ा शुमाल की तरफ गंदावा बलूचिस्तान का एक शहर है। गंदावा से कलात और खुजदार को कनेक्ट करती है। इसकी शक्ल घोड़े की नाल जैसी है, घोड़े के हॉर्स शू जैसी। और ये वो रास्ता है जो कि जमाना कबल तारीख से ट्रैवल और ट्रेड रूट था between Bhambor, which was a very famous and busy seaport on the uh, 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 Indian Ocean, and the markets of Kandhar. I keep saying Kandhar. We must remember that Kandhar, about 2003 or 400 years ago, Kandhar was a rich city. And even Alexander, when he was there in the year 327 before the Common Era, before Christ, he ordered a revamping of the defenses and reordering of the layout of the city. And he spent much money there. He planted a governor there. And for many years, Kandhar was, until Alexander died, not many years, 3 or 4 years, Kandhar was a center of for the Alexandrian Greeks. Later on, the Indo-Greeks took Kandhar. So Kandhar was a busy place, and the shortest trade route between Bhambor, which we later on know as Debel, where Muhammad bin Qasim had this battle against the Sindhi army. Debel was a very busy seaport. All the inland export, all the inland trade passed through this valley. Nowadays, the Brahvis travel through this valley between the Sindh and Balochistan lowlands every winter, every October, and return after the wheat harvest in April to the Kalat highlands, where they then take part in the harvest here. The valley is extremely beautiful and very historic. This building goes back to the early 17th century. It was built by Masoom Shah, who was the governor of Sakhar, Rodi, and Bhakkar, not the Bhakkar of our Thal in Punjab, but the Bhakkar of Sindh, which is an island lying in the Indus between Sakhar and Rodi. And Mir Masoom Shah traveled through here, and this building is attributed to him. It's a burial place, a funerary building. Mula Valley, very beautiful place. This was in March, and they were growing all sorts of vegetables here. It's not very high. It's about 3,000 feet above the sea, and very fertile, watered by this lovely river. And in Mula Valley, there is this place that we know in Balochistan as Tangis, very narrow clefts in limestone hills. This Tangi is called Chorrok, and Chorrok has tons of water spilling out of little orifices, little holes in the limestone wall. It's incredible. It's a water world. It's an incredibly beautiful water world. This place, my friends who took me there call this the massage point. The picture doesn't clarify it, but this water falls from a height of about 3.5 meters. And it is such a forceful fall of water that if you stand under it, you cannot, it's hard to bear the sheer force of the falling water. but you stand with your back to it and let it massage your shoulders. That's the most incredible experience. Chorok. In Balochistan, there is another place where I first went in February 1987. There was no green dome. There was just a lump of rocks with a turban on one side depicting the grave of the burial of a man. And they said this was Ari Pir. In those days, they had this story about Ari Pir being a very religious man, and he coming to this, and that he was somehow related to Mahmud Ghaznavi. And he came to this country, and the king, the local king, had a lovely daughter. Ari Pir fell in love with this beautiful young maiden and told the king that he wanted to marry her. Now, as fakirs go, he must have been lice-ridden and dirty. And the king said, get out of here, get lost, you. And Ari Pir became extremely incensed, and he cursed the king and his valley, the Saruna river valley, which they say was very fertile in those days, became barren and its river dried. But this is the Saruna river as it breaks out of its rocky gorge. It's a beautiful stream, and you can see the shrine in the far background and a mosque in the closer background. We are standing just above this river, which fans out to create a lake. The story of Ari Pir has over the years changed. I think he was just some wandering mendicant who died here and they turned him into a pir. But nowadays they have another pir, the crocodiles that live in this river, in this lake. And the biggest croc is about what, 9 feet long, and he's a magnificent beast. So believers come from Karachi and bring goats to sacrifice here, or they buy goats from local shepherds, good business for local shepherds, and have them thrown to the crocodile to have their wishes come true. Here's the keeper of the shrine sitting with this lump of meat and calling out to the crocodile. He goes, "Ao, Morsab, ayo," and Morsab swims across from the other side. He's very trained, and he throws the meat to Morsab. Now, the interesting thing is that the crocodile grabs this hunk of meat and gobbles it up. Crocodiles, by the very nature of their anatomy, when they have to eat, they have to keep their heads out of the water. If they didn't, they would drown. They would gulp water in and drown. But the locals, but those who are devoted to these crocodiles believe that when the crocodile shows you his eating, it means that he has accepted your prayer and your wish will come true. I will not comment further on this. Right, we saw a dormant volcano in northern Balochistan. Now we are on the Makran coast, and the time was in 1986 when I first went to this area. It took, I was in an army truck. I had begged the army to take me to Agor, and because I wanted to see a shrine there. We went past this volcano, but the Subedar who was in the truck with me would not let me stop to climb up and see what it was like. I had read of it from the work of, I think it's Lieutenant Hart of the Royal Indian Navy, writing in the 1820s. He said there is a set of 3 mud volcanoes. 2 of them are active, one is dormant. And here is the dormant one. I'm standing on the rim of the dormant one. It's empty. It's just a crater, a round crater. And there in the background is the active volcano and a mud volcano. It's not an erupting lava volcano. It's a mud volcano. I'll take you up there and show you what it is like. But Notice those flow marks on coming down the slope. These are the mud that erupts, overflows over the rim, and over the millennia, it has added to the height of this mountain. Imagine how many millions of years this has been going on. Here's the second one. You can see the major cone in the background. Here's the second one. It's a huge, it's about what? I think about 40 meters across. That's about 120 feet across. And it's filled with this very soft goo and bubbling here and there. If you fall into this, you're a goner. There's no way you can be pulled out. You'll slowly be sucked into the depths. Here we are now on the top of that highest volcano, and that little round thing that you see in the middle is a bubble bursting through the warm mud. It keeps bubbling and overflowing, and all this is a very, very quick quicksand. Same thing again. You can see the dormant volcano on the right side of the picture. Misgar Post Office. This is the oldest post office in Gilgit-Baltistan. Now, Misgar is in Gujal, which you also know as Upper Hunza, which is an incorrect name because the people of Gujal take exception to being called people of Upper Hunza. Properly, it is Gujal. And Misgar is this little, lovely little village on the right side or on the west side of the Karakoram Highway. This post office was built in 1898 when the British Indian government established the first legate or embassy in Kashgar. And this is the way, you can see the pathway leading into the hills, and you can also see it here going up this hill. And here are two little cairns to mark this road. This road went over the Mintaka Pass. We'll come to that pass in a little while. But in 1835, Peter Fleming, who was Ian Fleming, the creator of James Bond, Ian Fleming's brother and a journalist for the Telegraph of London, Peter Fleming came from the other side. He was traveling through China with this remarkable Swiss woman, Ella Maillart, who also wrote a book. Fleming wrote this incredibly readable book titled News from Tartary. Ella Maillart, several years later, wrote another book called Turkestan Solo. Fleming stopped here at this place, and he says this was, you know, in Scandinavian mythology, in Arabic, we believe that hell is a hellishly hot place where fires burn and bad people are burnt. In Scandinavian Nordic mythologies, hell is a hellishly cold place. And when Fleming came this way, he said this particular place reminded him of the Greek mythological hell, which was the nether regions of that hell, he wrote. You know, it was dismal, it was cold and miserable. But it still has its beauty. Same place, another view. Here are these two young men, Amanullah on the left and Irfanullah on the right, cousins, both of them. And this border post says Pakistan 1964. On the other side, it says China 1964. In 1962, China had this battle with India for Aksai Chin, and China annexed some part of it after this battle. In consequence, they asked Pakistan to give them a large chunk of area to safeguard that region. And Pakistan then gave away much of the Shaksgam River Valley, which we are not going to talk about, and all the way to Aksai Chin. official circles deny that we ever gave anything to China, or if they have to lie, they say we got a lot back in return from China, a lot of area back from the Chinese. We didn't. We only gave China away. But then the border was demarcated for the first time, and these border posts were put up. So this is the crest of Mintaka Pass. It's 16,000 feet high. And this was the old route between Hunza and Kashgar. And mind you, I have to tell you this story. There was no Silk Road entering this way. This, you cannot call this the Silk Road. There was no trade of silk on this road. There was no long distance trade on this. The only thing we know is that the people of Hunza, the king especially, the kings of Hunza had matrimonial relationships with the people of Kashgar, and they used to travel locally. So some local travel did take place, and Buddhist monks would have come this way from China to get to Taxila or Swat, which were great and famous Buddhist centers in the old days. So this wasn't the Silk Road. This Silk Road is calling it a Silk Road is a myth created in 1985 when the Khanjarab Pass was opened to foreign tourists, and local tour operators wanted to glamorize it, the road. So they started calling it the Silk Road. You know, this was a very, very stupid thing to do. What they should have done was glamorize the building of the Karakoram Highway, which itself was such a glamorous thing. So many people gave up their lives for it. It took so many years. The terrain was treacherous. It was hellishly hot in summers and very, very cold in winters with snow falling. So instead of glamorizing what we had, they created a myth and called it the Silk Road, which is utter rubbish. Not very far from Mintaka Pass, there is another valley called Chapursan. My Murshid, the late Ubaidullah Beg Sahab, I wonder how many of you would know him. Ubaidullah Beg Sahab had a story to tell about Chapursan, which in Persian would mean Kya Poochte Ho? Chapursan. Kya Poochte Ho? And then he had a story which I now forget because he told me this story 40 years ago. Beg Sahab was the greatest storyteller ever. But this is the shrine of Baba Gundi, the old man from Gund. They say Gund is a village in the Wakhan district of northern Afghanistan, which I have not been able to pinpoint on any map. They say this Baba came to this valley, and here too, we have another Saint George, another Bala Nosh. He found this girl weeping, sitting by a pond and weeping. And it turned out that the pond, a dragon lived in the pond, and every day a lot was drawn to feed the dragon. And this time it was this girl's turn. So Baba Gundi, as is the want of all these Babas, told the girl to go home, and he killed the dragon. So when he came to the village, the people were not really gratified. They said, fine, thank you very much, now get the hell out of here. And they booed him out. They threw stones at him. But the people of Chapursan are not like that. They are the gentlest, most wonderful, most disarming, incredibly beautiful people. And you know, I say the children speak with so much. Even little children will speak to you in a way that will bring tears to your eyes. It's so beautiful the way they speak with you. So there was one woman who took the Baba in and gave him and sheltered him in her home. From her goats, she fed him milk and everything. And then the Baba said to her to not leave her home because he was bringing down a storm of a flood of stones. And then the Baba disappeared. Oh no, I forget the story. Yes, the first time when the Baba rescued this girl, the people were very kind to him. And the Baba was leaving. He said, when you need my help, just call to me and I'll be back. and then just to check if he was right, they called him and he came back, and then they booed him and threw stones at him. And then this woman took him in, and sure enough, the Baba left. The woman went into her house and shut the door, and there came this huge storm, a flood of stones and sand, and obliterated the village, killed everyone except that old woman. Now, in the language of this area, Vakhi, Kampir is an old woman, and Deor is ghar, Deor, a house. So Kampir Deor is a place on the map, and which is marked by a stone, which they say was the old woman's house. And this is the remains of those that flood of stones that the Baba brought down. Now there are two things. These are the remains of a retreating glacier. About 1,000 years ago, there would have been a glacier here, but over the years, it began to recede. And with the global warming beginning about 150 years ago, it would have disappeared. So to explain, people who did not understand glaciology would have had to explain these heaps of rock and sand. So they created this story. And secondly, why do our religious men have to be such vindictive bastards? I mean, a religious person cannot wish death or destruction upon anyone. I have heard all these very silly stories about a Baba not letting this happen, this good thing happen, making that bad thing happen. For example, Lake Kalar Kahar in the Salt Range is said to have been turned bitter by none other than Baba Farid Shakarganj. They say he was traveling through the area, and there were some girls filling up their water pots. So he says, "Girls, I would like a drink." And the girls mockingly said, "Babe, ate kaudi kahar te kaudi." And the Baba says, "Fir kaudi ravegi." And it turned bitter. Farid Shakarganj was a very fine man, was a man of God. He would not have wished evil upon fellow humans. These are such, this is the evil that lurks within us all, that we create these very malicious stories about invented saints. Now, on the other side, on the east side of the Karakoram highway, is this lovely village of Shimshal. And here too they speak Wahi language, and these are wonderful people again, very hardy. They're made of steel. On the Shimshal Pass, east of the village of Shimshal, the pass is about 15,500 feet high. There are two lovely little lakes. This is in July 2010. On the 7th of July, I was just below the pass, and we had a blizzard, 7th of July, a blizzard. We couldn't continue, so we camped there at the bottom of the pass and then climbed up the next morning to this and to this, Shuvert. Shu is in Wahi, the language, the local language. Shu is black. I've never asked them what Wert is. I think Wert is a meadow, black meadow, probably the name means. But this is one summer pasture, the only habitation in the entire country of Pakistan, in fact, in the entire subcontinent, which lies geographically not in the subcontinent, but in Central Asia. Now, imagine this long line of the Himalayas and the Karakorams and the Hindu Kush making a watershed. The rivers on the north side of this watershed flow into Central Asia, and the rivers on the south side feed the Indus, Brahmaputra, and Indus Gangetic river system. The rivers in Shuvert are the only rivers in the subcontinent, meaning that it is on the map, it is in Pakistan, which is in the subcontinent. But geographically, if you look at it, it's north of the watershed of the Great Asiatic Divide, because the waters here all go into the Shaksgam River, which feeds the Yarkand River, and which is eventually lost in the Taklamakan Desert. This, if you ever go there, you'll be in Central Asia without having left the borders of Pakistan. It is a remarkable little place, and the people are incredibly beautiful. Another view of Schubert. Right, Buddhist Pakistan. A lot of people, a lot of Western filmmakers, documentary makers want to do films on Buddhist Pakistan, but various things are keeping them. This is my favorite Buddhist monastery this is in Bunair, and it's known as Rani Gut. Rani Gut means a stone. They say there was a vertical stone. I think I might have a picture here showing you that stone, a rock, a vertical rock on which the Rani who ruled this place would sit to look across her kingdom. But this, the Rani is fictitious. This monastery was built in the age of the great Kushan king Kanishk. And Kanishk ruled in the early years of the 3rd century of the Common Era, about 200 of the Common Era. It is a beautiful monastery overlooking the Yusufzai plains, and there's a monastery and there is a stupa, which you see on the left. And there in the background is that vertical rock that gives this place its name, where the Rani supposedly placed her throne to look over her kingdom. We have circular stupas, but this stupa is cuneiform. It's formed like a cross, and these are rare stupas. The only other I know is Bhamala stupa near Taxila. It's a beautiful place, very scenic and very atmospheric. It's a spiritual feeling. It's a spiritual experience being to Ranigarh. Some modern engineering done by the Brits in the early 20th century. What they did was they created this headwork on the Swat River to take out a canal known as the Upper Swat Canal, and then they tunneled into the mountains near the Malakand Pass to take the canal through 3.5 kilometers of rock into the Yusufzai plain. The Upper Swat Canal today does a lot of irrigation in the Mardan area in the Yusufzai plains. It's a beautiful place, and I was very lucky. There was a wind and rainstorm, and then it cleared, and we have this beautiful rainbow. This is a very rare thing for a photographer. Some more modern engineering. On this crest here, you can just see the turrets of a fort. This is the fort of Mangla. And this is an engineering work done by a man called John Benton. He was the same man who designed the Upper Swat Canal and the tunnel. And the tunnel is known after him as Benton Tunnel. John Benton said, you know, we don't need to build a dam or a weir or a barrage across the Jhelum River. All we need to do is the river flows and makes a sharp bend first to the left and then to the right. So in this little corner, if they build headworks, they will not need to drain the river at all, but whenever the water flows, they can open the gates and fill the canal. This is a remarkably beautiful piece of engineering. It's all stone, and it was built in 1916. It has, since the building of the Mangla Dam, it has been abandoned, but the stonework has been preserved. And I say this is a beautiful place to take students of engineering and architecture to show them what can still be done. Tharparkar Desert in Sindh, and this is Godi Temple. And they say there was it is named after the god Godicha, who is an incarnation of Mahadev or Shiva. And that there was this statue of Godicha with the 3 diamonds on his, 2 on his breast and 1 on his forehead, and which was exhibited in this, which was placed in this temple. But one Soda Rajput thought it would be better if he took the statue in his custody and exhibited it to believers or against payment. So he became very rich. He took the statue around the desert, or rich people came to him to worship the statue, and they paid him good money. He became very rich. And when he was about to die, he gave the statue to, and he would hide it somewhere, not telling anyone where it was hidden, except on his deathbed to his eldest son. And so it came down through the generations until the Talpurs annexed Sindh to their, annexed Tharparkar to their kingdom. And they got hold of this Soda, who was Rajput chief, who then had custody of the statue. He was called Satoji Soda. And they tortured the man to to make him divulge the hiding place of the statue. But the man was too good. He would not tell them, and he died from the torture. So to this day, somewhere in the Thar, under the dunes, there is a statue of Goricha with 3 large diamonds, a fortune, I can assure you. And someone has to go and look for that statue. It's a beautiful temple. It's very typical of Gujarati temple architecture. The stucco work is so superior on the pillars that it looks like marble. And as we go towards Nagar Parkar, just outside of Nagar Parkar, we have this beautiful, starkly Gujarati temple known as the Bodhisar temple. I have seen it. I've been going to Tharparkar since 1984, and the spire was beautiful, very ornate and nicely sculptured. But the earthquake of the year 2001, I think, destroyed it. And now you can see that there are brick bolsters to hold up the falling lintels. The spire has also collapsed. But it's still very, very beautiful. And in the background, you can see the Karanjhar hills of Nagar Parkar. These hills are of red granite. And Karanjhar in Sindhi means a sprinkling of black sprinkled hills. This is the pond of Bodhisar. In the very distant past, in the 11th century, they say Bhodai was the ruler of Bodhisar, and sometimes the area would face a drought, and this pond would dry up, which was the source of water for these people. So I have the name wrong. Bhodai was the name of the sun. The king sacrificed his son and buried him in this pond, in the bottom of this pond, so that the pond may never be without water. But sadly, in modern global warming days, it has once or twice been without water. The Karanjhar hills in very early morning light, and they look, this is the actual color they look like. There at the bottom, those white houses are the town of Nagar Parkar. A little north of Nagar Parkar, not a little north, I would say about 150 or 60 kilometers in a straight line north of Nagar Parkar, is this very beautiful part of Thar known as Achhado Thar or white Thar. Here, the sand is of a different quality. In the Thar desert of Mithi district, or in the south near Nagar Parkar, Mithi, others, Islam Court, the sand is gray brown and sort of solid looking and solid feeling. This sand is very powdery and it's white. It's like images of the Taklamakan desert or the Sahara desert, and it's rippled by the wind. It's a beautiful place. Railway architecture, and we have what I call the dollhouse railway station of Pakistan. This is Atak, Khurd. The Khurd ka matlab hai chota. Atak, Khurd, and the Khyber Pass, I think, or some, no, it's not the Khyber Pass because this is very early morning. And this is some other train coming through from the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa side. You can see the Atak Bridge in the background. And in old days, when I was a young child, I was told that this bridge is made by the femur, the thigh bone of Hazrat Adam alayhi salam. And people promised me, yeah, no, you have to go and see see it. The bone is actually, you can see the bone. It's made on a bone of the Hazrat. And the last time I heard this was about 20 years ago. But I don't think that story is extant because a lot of people must have gone and checked out those girders. The railway station, this railway station, Atak Khurd, is the most beautiful in Pakistan. Now, going back to Balochistan, if you take the train, now you can't because it doesn't run anymore. But if you, in the old days, took the train from Quetta to Taftan and Zahedan in Iran, you went through this little picturesque railway station. I don't know where this marble comes from because I don't know any marble hills nearby. But this is the station of Alam Reg, abandoned. And this is the condition of the line in 2009. With the ruins of Isa Tahir railway station in the background. This could have been the subcontinent's railway link with Europe. And it once upon a time almost was, but what we've done to our railways in the last, sorry, in the last 20, 30 years is shameful. And these lines are no longer in use now. I mean, a train does go, a freight train does ply between Quetta and Taftan, but it takes ages to cover the journey because it can never travel more than 20 kilometers an hour. Pakistan also has the highest narrow gauge railway station in the world at Khan Meterzai in the Job Valley, on this Job Valley railway, ZVR they called it. It was a narrow gauge railway line connecting Bostan, northwest of Quetta, with Job to nearly 300 kilometers to northeast of Bostan is northeast of Quetta. And from Bostan, 298 kilometers northeast is Job, or which in the old days was once also called Fort Sandeman after Colonel Sandeman. Khan Meterzai on this railway line is the highest narrow gauge railway station in the world, 7,224 feet high. And this picture was taken in February 2005, but this line has been dead since the early 1986. When I went there the first time, a few years after it was shut down, there was still a railway station master here posted at this station, and he told me such beautiful stories of how trains would get stuck in the snow drifts at Khan Metersay. Sadly, the line is gone, and so are those stories. This is a summertime image of the same railway station. The railway stations on the Yobe Valley line are the most picturesque. They're all designed like this. Now, north of Sibbi, if you go by train from, say, Sakhar and Rodi to Quetta, you travel up the Bolan Pass. But many years before the Bolan Pass route became functional in the 1920s, the railway line in the 1880s would go north from Sibbi into the Nadi River Valley. And this is the Nadi railway station. The Nadi River is here. And this is the railway line going north from Sibbi to the Nadi River is crossed in about 10 or 15 kilometers. It is crossed and recrossed about 6 or 7 times. And these bridges were the only way for the line to go across. After Nawab Akbar Khan Bukti was assassinated in 2006, August 2006, the Baloch were very angry, and local Murri tribesmen blew up 3 bridges. 2 were completely damaged, and 1 was partially damaged. They now tell me that these bridges have been rehabilitated, but the train has not resumed. But the Yobe Valley line was incredibly beautiful and very, very picturesque. And there were names, such evocative names like Tandoori, very hot in summers and blistering cold in winters. Strange place, Tandoori. And Host, magical. In the background, you can see snow-laden hills. Host. North of Host, the railway line made this dramatic loop and climbed up this hill into this rift. This is Chhappar Rift. And this crack was created by an ancient earthquake millions of years ago. And one of the greatest railway engineering feats of British railway engineers was the building of this bridge. But this line ran only until June. It was commissioned in 1886 and it ran until 1942. On the 9th of July, 1942, there was a rainstorm, and much of this line just here on the other side of this crack was washed out by the rain. Earlier too, this line had been very troublesome. There were mud flows and there were landslips, and the line had to be constantly repaired and looked after. So on the storm of the 9th of July 1942, the line was washed out. The Great War was on, the Second World War. The steel was needed to build bombs to kill the Germans and the Japanese. And so what they did was they dismantled the entire line north of Zardalu, a station on this line. And there was no trouble because the line by this time, this was 1942, and I told you earlier that in the 1920s, the line through the Bolan Pass had already been commissioned. So the train started using that line only. And the last train that ran on this line was early in July, and never again. The line was uprooted, the bridges were dismantled, all the steel was turned into guns and ammunition. The Soon Valley in Punjab, if you've not been there, go now. This is the time to be there, and this is what it looks like. And there is now a nice little motel on Khabeki Lake, not very far from this spot. By the way, this little valley has been gouged out by a prehistoric glacier This is a typical glacier valley, uh, maybe several hundreds of millions of years ago. Also in the Son Valley is this lovely gem of a lake, Jalar. And Jalar is one lake where bar-headed geese that we in Punjabi call mug winter from Siberia. They come from Siberia to spend their winters here. I hope they're not killing these geese. It's a lovely bird, a large bird with two bars on either side of its face. That's why they call it bar-headed goose. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of this slideshow. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you got to see some parts of Pakistan that you did not even know existed. Go travel and look for yourselves now.